it's me again. I promise it's the final time that you see me here or here. So this is the last part. So after we had everything, like first we had a lot about experience from survivors, the work experience. Then we had a really great session about how to work with traumatized people. Now we start what's with us, helpers, mental helpers. My presentation is about self-care. So one of my suggestions is to tell you, like, okay people, you have 15 minutes for self-care, do whatever you want, whatever you like and prefer, for taking care for yourself. But still, I have to be here and speak about this, but doesn't mention you can go somewhere. And also the other thing, I don't see myself as expert in self-care, because if I would be, or if I am expert, I think I will be in my room taking a nap and not standing here. But I will try my best. So, I will try to speak about, actually, what is my idea. It's 3 different sentences. First is, what is the problem of our work with traumatized people, mostly traumatized women in this room. The second one is, okay, what can we do about taking care of ourselves? And third is like good perspective. It's not only negative effects of working with traumatized persons, but there are also some positive things in it. So, first of all, I think that lots of us here in this room are aware that we really rarely speak about impact of the trauma on ourselves, especially in this region. We really rarely speak about this influence of working with trauma. Very often we use terms burnout, which is pretty unusual, no, not unusual, inefficient for speaking about the issue of working with traumatized people. Especially that this field is, again, in this region especially, it's kindly new to think about the influence and the impact of work with trauma, but also from the other perspective, for me, as a part of me is still like a scientific person, is that there is still missing distinguishing concept between some of terms like vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress. I really read so many different papers in the last few months to try to make really good distinction. I wouldn't actually offer it, but I will offer some predictors and some other things that maybe it's possible to recognize it. So, what is the problem? I start actually with one quotation, and this quotation is, for me, from my perspective, working in women's room, very often a new person, new member of team came to women's room, they ask us, okay, could you tell us how you succeed to have all this work and that you are so good, what are your tricks, what are your techniques, how you manage not to be influenced by your work. First of all, like, who is not influenced by this work? So this is the reason for this quotation. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not to be touched by it is unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. And unfortunately or fortunately, this is the fact. Concerning professional stress and helping profession, as I mentioned, there are lots of overlapping terms that we use, from burnout, vicarious traumatization, secondary traumatic stress, secondary post-traumatic stress disorder, compassion fatigue, counter-transference. There are lots of terms that in some papers are used for the same thing. Who are the most exposed? Firefighters, police officers, but also us, mental health workers who work in services, especially for survivors of sexual violence, mental health professionals, social workers. Key differences between these concepts of burnout and NVT and STS. First of all, burnout is more general phenomenon, can occur in any scope or in scope of any social services. And it's more about stress and problems on the work. So it means it's cumulative and predictable, and therefore it can be reduced. We can change our job, we can go to vacation, we can run away from job, here, to the different country or anywhere. At the same time, vicarious traumatization and secondary traumatic stress are completely different phenomena. Actually, it's really connected with our work. Work with people who survive trauma. It describes conditions and consequences, actually, of our exposure to trauma and client with traumatic experience. Problem is that I think that, especially again in our region, most of the helpers are not aware of the influence of our work on ourselves. So I put just one research from Epstein and Bauer, who is the most exposed. First, psychiatrists, like double the number of suicide compared with other medical professionals. I'm a psychologist, now it's good part, like 1 in 4 have suicidal thoughts, 1 in 16 try attempt suicide. And it's especially a problem all the time with vicarious traumatization and traumatic stress disorder, that gender is very predictable factor, especially in way for women. So women psychologists have 3 times higher rates of suicide than general population. According to some studies, about 1/3 of people working in the services for victims or survivors, doesn't matter, it's not only for sexual violence, met diagnostic criteria for PTSD. So, what's the issue of indirect traumatization? First of all, somehow it looks it's inevitable challenge of the profession, working with traumatized people. It influences us on actually our emotions, our relationships, our life outside of the work. But there is always but this but is good one. It could be both positive and negative. Some changes or impacts are negative, but there are also possibility for some positive outcomes, and I will speak more about it. And it's actually important that it's non-binary view of the impact of work with trauma. Concerning vicarious traumatization, it's actually, as I already mentioned, it came from work with traumatized people. And actually, I don't like this definition, and I think that lots of you in this room knows about it. But what is important is actually personal transformation that we experienced due to our work. And most important part of this transformation is concerning how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we see the world around us. The problem is actually it's these 3 things connected with VT. It's pervasive, it's cumulative, and it could be permanent. Pervasive in a way that it affects different all areas, actually, not different, but all areas of helper's life, including, as I already mentioned, emotions, relationships, other things. It's cumulative. It means if you work longer with a larger number of clients or traumatized people, it would be worse. And it's permanent. According to some researchers, even though we stop working in this field and change job, some of the negative effects will last for a long period, still after that. At the same time, it's kind of normal response to the work that we have, so no need to be pathologized in any way. It's actually kind of price that we pay for the work we have. It can result in decrease of motivation, ambitiously, and empathy. Some signs that I think we can recognize in ourselves if we think about it. First of all is feeling of vulnerability. We don't see the world anymore like very safe, nice place. We are questioning our safety of our close persons. Then difficulty in trusting other people, change view of the world, and feelings of alienation. When I think about it, for me, it's especially this feeling of alienation, especially for us working in the field of sexual violence, because so few services specialized for sexual violence, the topic is always out of focus. There is no special interest. Somehow, like, oh, yeah, recognize sexual violence. Okay. So there is always this kind of feeling that we are somehow alone, left somewhere behind. Secondary traumatic stress, it means actually that because we are working with persons who survive trauma, we also start developing some specific symptoms of PTSD called secondary traumatic stress. So again, I think that all of us in this room knows what are the major symptoms of PTSD: intrusive reactions, for nightmares, flashbacks, re-experiencing trauma, avoiding reactions. For example, I can see in myself some of these avoiding reactions. Yesterday, this actress, Mirjana Karanović, mentioned a movie Grbavica. It's so very well-known movie in Croatia and all the region. It's not the same situation like in Serbia, that we didn't have opportunity to see it. We had opportunity. I didn't want actually to see it in a way, oh my God, I cannot look at or read or think about sexual violence anymore in my free time. So sometimes I really have these avoiding reactions. And of course, hyperarousal reactions like hypervigilance, prolonged concentration, and other things. So, after I read 15 or 20 researches, I tried to make kind of table about predictors of BT and STS. And as you can see, it's not so clear. In lots of cases, the findings are inconsistent. For coping strategies, there are reasonable evidence for VT, not for STS. Personal, some for VT. What is really reasonable is gender. In a way, that women will be experiencing more symptoms of VT and STS. And it's interesting that personal trauma history, it's again, it's a problem with persuasive evidence for VT, but inconsistable for STS. Also, it's important, like number of the clients that we work with, and it's unfortunately inconsistent for VT, but very persuasive for STS. Supervision, some evidences. What to do actually, very shortly, how to take care of our mental health as helpers. First of all, education. Second, immediate protection of our mental health. And fortunately, our second presenter will speak more about this part. And third is developing self-help techniques. Concerning education, it's nothing special. It's that we really need education about VT, STS, about trauma, post-traumatic growth, resilience. Concerning immediate help for protection of helpers' mental health, 4 major points: supervision, consultations. I really wouldn't speak about supervision because it's in second presentation. Consultation means that persons from different professions and different experiences sit together, think about cases, and came up with some conclusion. Psychological debriefing, something pretty similar, like work with traumatized people in a way to have one time, like a few hours, opportunity to speak about our emotions, reactions, feelings after we heard something very traumatic from our clients. And finally, developing different self-help techniques. I think in lots of cases it depends on us, but relaxation, learning about our boundaries, how to say no, structuring time, recreations, and first of all, and the most important part, is self-perception about our own feelings, fatigue from the work that we are doing. It's most important. So some of these questions like, in what situations does my job tire me, what is typical for these situations, what are my reactions, thoughts, ideas about it. So, finish with something good. As we have trauma and traumatic growth, there is also something called vicarious post-traumatic growth. It means that people who are exposed to vicarious trauma can accept these some negative reactions that I already mentioned, can develop some positive reactions, or they report some positive reactions. And mostly in a field of self-perception, interpersonal relationship, and life philosophy. So, these positive changes, we can say, are associated with greater life satisfaction, happiness, general psychological, physical, and emotional well-being. So, it depends really about so many different factors. Should it be only this negative impact of refugee trauma, or what are all these predictors that we can come to some positive outcomes, positive conclusions? And I will finish with last example from my own experience. I don't see myself, but maybe it's a sign of SDS or VT, who knows. I don't see actually that I have lots of problems in this field, so I think that I'm still good in my work, still professional, objective, or empathic, whatever. When I started my job working actually in the field of sexual violence, I was a young psychologist, 22 years, still at university. It was war in Croatia, and I was interested in the field of human sexuality. So I was working in refugee camps all around Croatia, working with youth. They called me as someone who's dealing with sexuality of youth to learn them about sexuality, contraception, and so many things necessary for kids, like 3,000 people in fences, without possibility to get out, doesn't matter how long they will stay there. So that was my reason why I was there. And women who survived rape somehow find out that someone who's teaching kids about sexuality would be good enough for them to come and tell their story, because they didn't have opportunities to speak with anyone. Some international organizations who came to Croatia, they put like a paper on the tree. Women who survived rape can come Tuesday at 5 o'clock at this office. So no one ever showed there. So women start coming to speak with me. I was completely unprepared, didn't know anything about trauma. So in few cases it looks for me like this. They came, start speaking about their experience. I tell them, could you please stop just for a second, get out, vomiting, coming back, and okay, I can do it. I really didn't know actually what I was doing for myself, what type of responsibility, without supervision, without anything. Being in refugee camps for like 20 days, listening all these stories, it was really hard time for me. But somehow after that I started working with the Center for Women War Victims, getting education, getting supervision and everything. And I think even though when it's so heavy and so hard, there is possibility that we develop ourselves and get rid of some of this negative impact of the trauma that we survive. Thank you for your attention. Oh, it's 1 minute and something more. Sorry for that. I promised myself that I will be very on the time. Thank you.